ReZero Web Novel Volume 34 was an absolute banger, and if this is a sign of things to come in Arc 8, then I'm going to love this arc. As I've made clear in past reviews, I'm a huge fan of Todd, Subaru, and Vincent, and I love these more intimate, one-on-one emotional scenes, some may even call them crash-outs, and so this volume was tailor-made for me. The overall structure of the book was a big improvement and a much-needed return to basics for ReZero. Arc 7, in particular volumes 30, 32, 33, had a lot of meandering dialogue which sometimes went for way too long, and also it had this constant need to put the spotlight on every single character, which there are a lot of, and so we ended up with some jarring point of view switches where it felt sometimes like the narrative was just jumping all over the place. This volume keeps the narrative concise by making Subaru almost the exclusive point of view throughout the entire book, something I greatly missed, and also by having a smaller cast, it has a tighter focus, and so it allows the dialogue and the narrative to flow much smoother. Arc 7, especially towards the end, sacrificed a lot of intimacy and reader investment for scale. The conflict in Vollachia had to feel grand, it had to have all of these characters, and that is fine, and it is also my expectation that Arc 8 will head in that direction. However, this volume to me is ReZero at its best, focusing on conversations between a few characters, focusing on personal character drama and well-written dialogue. The volume starts back at Rupugana, the Imperial capital, where zombies are attacking the living, and it is up to Subaru's group to escape, and they have a few members who are not equipped to fight, namely the fake princes, who no one cares about. I don't think they even had a line of dialogue. They just useless background characters no one cares about. Either way, Flop, who is in a very precarious health condition, and Katya, who is a very nice lady, not really, but she's a lady and also a liability on wheels, so this is quite a difficult escape. The situation is a difficult one, and to make matters worse, it is revealed that Katya's loving fiancé is none other than the devil incarnate himself, the man Subaru calls even worse than the archbishops, and I personally call the GOAT, Todd Fang. Starting Arc 8 by having Subaru and Todd team up is perhaps the single most entertaining thing the author could have possibly written, and I thank him for it. There is a lot of tension at the beginning, but maybe it's because we've explored the Todd character so much, or maybe I'm also a psycho and can relate with his line of thinking. Haha, why did I say that? Haha, that was weird. Haha, just a joke. Either way, it was obvious to me that Todd wouldn't do anything to them, at least at the beginning. Todd is the ultimate pragmatist. He will always follow the rational choice no matter how he feels about it, and cooperating with Subaru's group was the most advantageous option, and as the narrator and Subaru himself put it, because Todd is so good at checkmating Subaru, most of what we've seen from him has actually never happened in the main timeline because there were so many resets. One could argue that Todd is almost suffering from success because he is so good at his job that his wins get erased from history due to the MC's plot armor. Despite personal issues, they make a very good team, combining Todd's more analytical side and his very accurate animal-like instincts. With Subaru and Beatrice's powers, they manage to make a very smooth progression up until they find the big, bad, revived evil Cyclops who is here for a fight. I actually enjoy that they brought this dude back, because if you recall back in Arc 7, I don't think I even mentioned him in the video, but we spent almost an entire chapter giving the backstory on this dude and building him up as someone who was important, and then he was just one shot by Arakia, like a complete jobber. And I'll be honest, to me that was funny. It was very Overlord-esque humor, something I enjoy for those who have seen that series, but it almost felt like a waste of time because Arc 7 was already, in my mind, very bloated, and that felt like a lot of description that went nowhere. So to see Mr. Cyclops come back was cool because it paid off the time invested in Arc 7, and also because it showed how ridiculously powerful the zombie healing ability is on an already strong opponent. So this is about to get very freaky when actual super powerful dudes get revived. Arcade is building a massive hype off of this mini boss fight already. During the arduous fight against the Cyclops, Subaru and Todd get separated from the group, and as I was reading this I was already salivating because I knew it was about to get good. The recurring theme of Subaru's many difficulties is, as I've said many times, his hero complex, this obsessive-compulsive need to save those around him, something that has manifested ever since Arc 1, where he risks his life for people he barely knew. This moral obligation of his gets even more toxic and more incomprehensible when Subaru also wants to save those he hates. He hates Todd, he knows Todd is a bad man, and yet he still cares for him and wants to save him. Subaru does not want to abandon anyone that he feels he can save, whether he likes them or not. And it's precisely this emotional irrationality, this impulsiveness that drives Todd crazy. Todd cannot understand Subaru and therefore cannot trust him, and we all know what happens when Todd doesn't trust someone. And that's why, once nobody is looking, Todd grabs his axe and goes back to what he does best. Beat up Subaru, and Subaru was so confused and felt so betrayed, screaming why, and I was screaming yes, that's my goat. This confrontation is fascinating on so many levels because, as we've seen throughout the series, Todd and Subaru are complete opposites of each other. Todd acts only based on rationality and logic, while Subaru is led by his emotions. Todd wants to do his job and be left alone. He doesn't want part of any grand plan, like he said, leave the thinking to the big shots, while Subaru is Ram's hero, Emilia's knight. He has big shoes to fill. Todd will discard anyone that he deems useless or dangerous with no hesitation, while Subaru will even try to save those he hates. They are truly the antithesis of each other. And it is precisely because of this irreconcilable difference that Todd attacks Subaru. Todd never gives a proper in-depth explanation. As we've seen throughout the series, Todd is not a yapper. He does not do evil monologues. He just does evil. Very efficiently. And so this is the best answer we get from him. You're a monster, much more so than that zombie. How could I go along with someone who decides who lives or dies based on his own fickle whims? That was Todd Fang's ultimatum. So in order to understand this scene, we have to use the two magical words which people who consume ReZero exclusively through TikTok hate the most, and that is reading comprehension. From a pure rational standpoint, getting rid of Subaru does pose some risk while they haven't fully escaped the capital. However, in Todd's mind, it is still the much more advantageous choice to take this opportunity to get rid of Subaru. Todd is paranoid not only because of his very peculiar personality, but also because he is a werewolf, and so there is a lot of prejudice against him, which compounds and makes his already twisted personality even worse. For a paranoid, neurotic, hyper-anxious character like Todd, what he wants the most, what he craves, is predictability. He loves simpletons like Jamal and Arakia, who he can easily manipulate, and he loves characters like Gustav, who are very rigid and uptight in their thinking and so are very easy to understand. What Todd can understand, he can predict and act accordingly. Subaru, however, is incomprehensible, mostly because of his personality and also RBD, which Todd obviously doesn't know about. Subaru is willing to throw his life away, and yet he says he will not lose, and he is willing to change his entire course of action on a whim just because he decided to save someone, even if he does not like or even hate that someone. To Todd, Subaru is chaos. He's a monster that fills Todd with suffocating panic because in Todd's mind, his life is threatened just by Subaru's existence. How could Todd live beside a man who does not play by the rules, who does not follow logic? That's insanity, and so he grabs his axe and tries to cleave away this evil monster. This is all from Todd's perspective, of course. From Subaru's perspective, he's just baffled and confused, like, what the hell, man? We were working together, what is wrong with you? Why are you this evil? I think Subaru understood Todd just a little bit better after talking with Vincent, but fundamentally I think these are two characters who will never see eye to eye. They will never truly understand each other, and that is why their chemistry is so great. This to me is one of the most entertaining relationships in all of ReZero. As he's about to lose, Subaru is then saved by Emilia and Rem in a very nostalgic moment that felt very wholesome. To have this reunion facing the villainous Todd felt very appropriate, and also Emilia continues her recurring theme of stopping evil right at the last moment. So before you do something mischievous or naughty, always think to yourself, would Emilia approve of this, or would she stop you right at the last moment with a very cute yeah? Back to Todd and his werewolfiness, I'm conflicted because on one hand, I think it did explain a bit of his paranoia, but like I said, I think his true personality is already a bit paranoid. That, if anything, just makes it worse. And on the other hand, I think it almost didn't add much to his character, and I think that was kind of the point. Even Subaru himself says that their animosity has nothing to do with Todd being a werewolf, and it is no excuse for his actions. And I loved the Todd named chapter where he refused to explain anything or give any sob story so that the readers felt bad for him. ReZero has set this amazing precedent for over 30 volumes where a character's named chapter is usually very good and will make the reader empathize with said character. And yet, Todd wants none of that. He does not want to be understood, he does not want to be pitied, he just is who he is. And that is my goat. For any other character, I think a fourth wall break like this in ReZero would have felt very jarring and very out of place, but for Todd it worked, so I commend the author for the very brave writing choice. I burst out laughing, it was very fun, and it fit the character perfectly. Now, I do have to note this, and this is a nitpick of mine. Once it was revealed that Todd is a werewolf, it is presumed that he has enhanced smell, just like he has enhanced vision and enhanced a lot of other physical features. So that scene all the way back in Guaral, where he did not know that Natsumi Schwartz was Subaru, that scene, I hated it then and I hate it even more now, because it's so bad. I hope they remove it in the light novel. I know it's a nitpick and I have to let it go, but I just really hated that scene. I think it was so out of character for Todd. Moving on to the next huge moment in this book, Emilia screaming at the top of her lungs. No, I'm just kidding. Obviously, Subaru and Vincent. I love this scene, and I think both characters really needed it, because for the longest time, Vincent has been hiding a lot of things from Subaru, and Subaru has had a very tough time understanding Vincent's perspective. Their relationship evolves in this volume as Vincent is humanized in the eyes of Subaru, and also he's not hiding things from him anymore. The first thing I really liked was that Vincent almost correctly assumed that Subaru was a stargazer, and I love this because even though Subaru has used and abused RBD multiple times throughout the series, he is still so suspicious and weird about it. Most characters, even if they notice something, they just ignore it because Subaru just gets things done. I guess they just assume Subaru has autism or something, but Vincent will not let it go, and he correctly guesses that Subaru can predict the future, just not the way he guessed. But either way, with the information Vincent has, and because Subaru's authority isn't even in Vincent's realm of possibilities, I say that Vincent had a pretty good guess. He was very close, very close. The climactic confrontation between the two is very over the top and melodramatic. We have a bit of everything: emotional outbursts, physicality, blood, shouting, apples, grappling, caressing, kissing. Those last two, I don't know if those happen, I think. Listen, I won't say this was hot because I'm not into that type of thing, but if I was... I love that this scene was way more theatrical than a perhaps real-life conversation would be. I love it when fiction just lets characters loose and express their emotions in a way that is raw and is fictional, but in a way that feels almost more real than real life. I don't know how to explain it, but what I do know is that ReZero does these emotional conversations very well. Obviously, these moments have to be earned. If every conversation is over the top like this, we just devolve into silliness. But after the entirety of Arc 7, I think this moment for Vincent felt more than deserved. Vincent was always resolute and unafraid because in his mind he was going to pass on and pass his will to his brilliant successor, Shisha, who deep down he considered a friend. And yet, his resolve was trampled on and he just feels lost and doesn't know what to do because he didn't plan for this. This makes Vincent have an existential crisis and feel a lot of survivor's guilt for being the only one left. He was prepared to lose himself, but not to lose another. And Vincent may be mostly a jerk, but he is still human and he still has a heart, somewhat, and this was a price that his heart was not willing to pay. The foundation of Vincent's composure completely crumbled and he lashes out at Subaru, even blaming him for taking away Shisha, something that Vincent himself knows to be wrong, but he can't help but be angry because he's just so emotional. In a conversation that mirrors the one Subaru had with Todd previously, Vincent gives largely the same criticisms, just in a lot more eloquent way because it's Vincent. Every so often, you leave it all to the emotions you feel at the moment, putting to the wayside all beliefs and ideas you have felt until then. You do not follow what you have decided upon, easily reversing whatever course you have concluded that you ought to be taking. You are unable to categorize what ought to be saved or not, reaching out your hand indiscriminately. Although a lot less psychopathic, of course, Vincent is also a very rational man, just like Todd, and for them, Subaru's way of living is just bizarre and incomprehensible. Throughout this conversation, Subaru refuses to back down and has a certain parallel to Julius's confrontation with Reed all the way back in Arc 6. There are moments where a character must change in order to grow, he must discard his past self. However, there are other moments where a character must stand his ground and be unapologetically himself, stand for his own values regardless of what others say. We saw this with Julius sticking to his knightly values in Arc 6, and we see this again with Subaru. Subaru cannot save everyone. He is, like Vincent put it, a banal man. However, he will always try to save those that his hands can reach, regardless of how he feels about them, even if he hates them, like he saved Louis, for example, and how he tried to save Todd. That is who Subaru Natsuki is. Once both of them have laid out their true feelings, we get to this incredibly surprising and cathartic moment where Vincent closes both of his eyes in front of Subaru, proving that deep down he considers him a friend, considers him someone that he can be vulnerable around, and he then mourns the loss of Shisha, showing his true feelings. And this moment, I'll be honest, I was reading this at 1 in the morning, this got me emotional. I almost cried. Almost. This conversation has so many amazing exchanges that I have a million notes for it, but I think this exchange in particular really summarizes their relationship. Not like you and I are friends or anything. Of course, speak not of such repulsive things, being a friend of yours. No, I simply have no need for the likes of friends, nor shall I ever want them. So your reasoning isn't that you can't make friends, but that you won't make them? I also did that when I pretended to be a proud lone wolf, but it's completely obvious to the people around you. Your disrespect knows no bounds now, does it? As we can see, at some point it's just two dudes being bros, and Subaru understands Shisha's parting message. He understood that Shisha was mad at Vincent for giving up against fate, that he cannot give up, that he has to try and fight fate in Arc 8. Mate? The chapter ends with the prideful Vincent apologizing to Subaru in what is yet another shocking turn of events that I never would have guessed, that Vincent, who always never looks uncool, he never does anything to back down or to diminish his emperor aura, he actually apologized to Subaru, and that was very, very powerful. I never would have imagined that the Arc 1 Hikikomori would be here befriending emperors, and yet here we are. Now, as I've said, I love this volume, but I've already praised it enough, and so I want to get into some of my criticisms, which may be a bit controversial, so I'll try to explain my thoughts properly. The first one is the reunion between the Oni sisters. I like that they off-screened the initial awkwardness of the meeting, so that when the reader actually sees the meeting for the first time in their eyes, they just get right away to the juicy bits. And I love it when two women go right for the juicy bits. Throughout Arc 7, much of Ram's character arc has been one of self-discovery, and because she lost her memories, she also lost a lot of her emotional burdens, allowing her to be free to truly discover who she is as a character, and this journey has been very fun and very rewarding. For much of Arcs 2 and 3, Ram was a supporting character, and I don't mean that in a meta sense, I mean that in a literal sense. It was hard to describe Ram without it being in relation to other characters, namely Ram's inferiority complex with her sister for being born less powerful and less funny and less charismatic and less a lot of other things. Her survivor's guilt for taking away Ram's powers, her obsessive love with Subaru where she almost felt validated by supporting him. Ram was an incredible character, but she could not stay like that, because that was not healthy. And so by wiping the save files clean, we get to see perhaps what is the true personality of Ram, and I've enjoyed her quite a lot. She has managed to re-establish who she is and her relationships in a healthier way. It is, for example, hinted that she may be starting to feel feelings for Subaru again, but this time in a much less desperate, clingy way. The Ram fans will hunt me down in the comment section. Anyway, let's move on. I was very much looking forward to seeing Ram rebuild her relationship with Ram, and I must confess I was a bit disappointed when they almost defaulted to who they were before. Seeing Ram call Ram Nesama instead of Nessa or simply Ram felt like a step back, because I was expecting them to have this endearing moment, which it was written to be endearing, I think, but I couldn't help but be a little bit frustrated that instead of them building their relationship anew and stand as equals on their own and cherish their own individuality, it felt like Ram was slotted back to the lower rung on the totem pole. And maybe I'm reading way too much into this, maybe my personal understanding of a suffix in Japanese is not as it is meant to be interpreted in the original Japanese language. Maybe I'm just being way too over the top and dramatic with this, but still, for this volume alone, I was a bit disappointed. I hope it's just a cute nickname for nostalgia, and I hope that their relationship grows in the healthy way that I hope it does. And hopefully I am completely wrong about this. However, as far as this volume goes, this annoyed me a little bit, just a little bit. Now, for another controversial statement, which will probably age very badly, and I recognize that, but I did not like the introduction of the Kararagi crew to the Vollachia saga, and I know this sounds crazy after I praised Julius so much in Arc 6, but hear me out. One of my main criticisms of Arc 7, especially towards the end, was that there were just too many characters. Even the author at times felt a bit lost trying to pay attention to everyone. In this very volume, like I feared all the way back in volume 31, the Pleiades battalion was almost completely ignored, and I understand that there's a lot of characters to go around, and let's be honest, the Emilia camp isn't going to take a step back for some dudes we just met 2 volumes ago, but still, it was a bit frustrating. They could have, for example, introduced Gustav to the conversation at the end with Vincent and all of the other characters. It feels like they are completely discarded and we're not even done with Vollachia yet, so that felt a bit disappointing. If someone asked me how I would improve Arc 7, adding more characters would not have been my first suggestion. In fact, it would have been right near the bottom, so as much as I like Julius and Anastacia and the woof woof Halibel, I think even though their introduction is hype, I think it is unneeded and may cause even more narrative bloat than we have already. And in before, the dudes in the comments, you don't know, Halibel is one of the strongest in the verse, man. Don't you ever call him a woof woof again. Woof woof. Ow! So I'm conflicted because introducing a character like Halibel when they already have the Divine Generals and Roswell and Emilia, it probably means there's going to be some very, very tough opponents in this arc, so I'm very hyped for that, and I've learned not to doubt the author, but still, I think there's a lot of narrative bloat and character bloat and cast bloat already, and I think this may just make matters worse. So for my final verdict on this volume, despite some hiccups, I loved it. There were so many great scenes which are so memorable and will stick with me for a long time, and even though I criticize some things, I'm sure they will be addressed later on, so I'm not too worried about them. This didn't feel like an arc introduction, like volumes 16 or 21 did, for example. It feels more like a continuation. Once again, I think the split of arc 7 and 8 is goofy, but it remains to be seen. But either way, this did mark a bit of a tone shift in the Vollachia saga, which I appreciated. Also, I do have to mention, Arc 8 being named Vincent Vollachia is so lame. It is incredibly lazy compared to the very poetic names we had for the other arcs. At least, if you want to be lazy, just call this one The Great Disaster or something. Don't call it Vincent Vollachia. Don't give it a character name. What is that? Just, either way, just something I found strange. I loved the tough conversations we had in this volume. I loved seeing the gang finally back together after so much time. I love the Vincent and Emilia alliance. I'm sure that will be very profitable for both sides, especially now that Anastacia is involved dealing with the money. And while I am hesitant, there's just too many storylines, too many ingredients to be cooked here, I think the author will probably stick the landing. I hope this isn't the end of Todd, though, because if Todd returns as a zombie, that would break my heart, because yes, he would be stronger, but Todd was never a powerhouse. That's not what he is about. His charm is the psychological element, so I hope that Todd stays living, and the fact that we didn't get any confirmation gives me just a slightest bit of hope. So let me know what you thought of this volume in the comment section below. Be sure to follow me on X, like, subscribe, and ciao!